The official start.
The official start. So, welcome everyone to our commentary on The Waterman. I have my wonderful cinematographer, Matthew J. Lloyd, here with me, and we're going to discuss this film that we had a lot of fun making.
Very kind introduction, David. Thank you.
Well, it's very true. Matt and I met doing a short film together called Government Cheese, directed by the lovely Paul Hunter. And Matt was just coming off of Spider-Man. Was the Far From Home one?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. And we did this short film, which we sort of did guerrilla style in 5 days. And I was just so impressed by Matt's ability to just put that camera on his back and go. And I was so impressed that the same guy who had just shot something like Spider-Man was doing this kind of acrobatic sort of filmmaking. And I'd also seen a film that Matt had shot called Cop Car, which I just loved the intimacy, but also the scope of the film. And we had great discussions about The Waterman, and, he just felt like the right guy to capture this imagery.
I was very thankful to be brought into it. It was a film that had a lot of personal implications for me, and I just loved your approach to your directorial style was something that was really interesting. I mean, I remember that the first day we were scouting, written across your script in bold type was "This is an adventure!" exclamation point.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, if I could just distill down every film I was doing into one sentence and write it on the cover of this, on the first page of the script, that I would probably be in better shape most of the time. So,
well, it's funny because a now wonderfully mutual collaborator of ours, Ava DuVernay, was the one who really gave me that thought of putting the theme of the movie not just on the cover of my script but at the forefront of my mind. She said, know what the theme of your movie is and imbue every scene, every character, every moment with that theme, and that's the way you have a tonally even film. So that's where I got that idea from.
Well, she's often correct, David, I've found in my experience.
That is also my experience.
I love that I was... Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, to further that, even in a scene like this, which was, sort of your... what could have been seen as a straightforward character introduction turns into an adventure, just with the use of the headlamp and the darkened room and the hiding under the bed. These little scenes that could be done, in a more straightforward fashion are always sort of treated with a little bit of adventure and kind of the clandestine, childlike thrill that Ro and Lonnie's character have there is still in keeping with the theme.
Exactly. Tell the audience what they're watching and then give it to them without abating.
Right.
I love this track by Rick Hassani. A big thing for me was to bring as much of my experience as a person of British birth, African descent, and now legally an American to this film. And Rick Hassani is a great sort of Nigerian artist. I love Afrobeat, and I wanted that hue, that tone, that sound in the film. Now, remember this shot, Matt? We had to really work on this to sort of... it was a bit of storytelling we knew we needed, and we had to play with it in post a bit, didn't we? That shot on the mantelpiece.
Sure did. It's always interesting when you're trying to show something that's not tied directly to the action of a scene. I've always struggled with that you sort of have to figure out how to get the audience into what's happening, but also emphasize the detail enough that's not, it's a very fine line where you don't just sort of show the thing. It feels integrated. It doesn't feel like you're dictating you're dictating the information. So that was it's always been a struggle for me, those kind of shots where you
Especially in the beginning of a movie where you really don't want to be spoon feeding the audience too much. You want to be getting into character, into tone. You want to really immerse them in the characters early. So anytime there's anything that feels too expositional, it can be off-putting.
Yeah.
I love this scene as well, Matt, because we really wanted to play with how dark we can make scenes whilst still feeling cinematically integrous, but without, especially with, actors, especially myself in that scene with darker skin, going too dark. And you're very, very good at that.
Oh, well, that's so kind. You all are such beautiful people. It's hard to, with a cast like this, it's hard to go wrong, truthfully. And I found that, there was something about this like notion that they've just moved to the home, and that I always remember like moving into a place for the first time and early, when you're still kind of shaping the space, you have lighting that isn't always so complete. You have kind of the one light on, but you haven't got everything where it's going to be yet. And so I've always kind of remembered those early times in a space as being, a little bit maybe moodier, a little bit, you know what I mean? It's not quite their space yet, but Rose's character is working on it, so it kind of felt appropriate to kind of play with that.
It was appropriate, literally, and then we also talked about what we wanted to do with the film in terms of the intimacy of the house. And juxtaposing that with when the kids eventually go into the forest, and how it's a very different kind of light. It's natural light. It's big, big skies, big, vistas in terms of the forest. And we really wanted there to be a juxtaposition between reality and fantasy. And reality was a bit more dark, a bit more moody, very much more intimate in this house. And so that we really are telling the story of the juxtaposition of the two things.
There's a special place our souls go.
And I love the choice you guys made with the color in the room, which normally, I would sort of, it's funny, like as a cinematographer, you come into the process after certain things have been kind of talked about and ironed out, and you try not to be hey, wait a minute, what's up with this yellow wall?
Right.
And to get it right, I think Larry actually had to do a couple of versions of it. I remember early when they painted it. That, it was just to get it right, because those colors are so strong. And then with the lighting sort of being a little bit down and mixed color in the sense of, windows and warm fixtures and all those things, it's a very delicate, it requires a lot of skill to work with that degree of, that amount of color.
And collaboration as well.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
This song being sung was actually a song my wife Jessica wrote for our second son Caleb, who would have nightmares when he was younger. And she wrote this song for him whenever he was struggling. And it's a now beloved moment that we put in the movie, and Rosario does so beautifully.
Yeah, it's a really, really powerful moment.
I loved this moment because this was in our first week or two of doing the film, and I don't know, this was the moment when I felt like a real filmmaker, when we did that trick of going from night to day, and you did that trick of the light. I just thought, okay, now we're making a movie. I just loved it so much. Just a bit of a geeky moment for me.
Dad's summer vacation. Sun's been up for hours. Come on.
The transition is a critical part of filmmaking.
Yeah.
How you move from one thing to the next elegantly, and to keep everybody's attention and have it not feel clunky.
Exactly. And what I meant by collaboration, Lawrence Bennett, our wonderful production designer, and you know, yes, he knew what he wanted to do on the basis of conversations I'd had with him. But then, you know, by the time you were in there with your cameras and the lighting, it wasn't quite right. And beautifully, you know, within a couple of hours, the wall was repainted a different color to make it work. And we had so much of that on this film, just a real can-do mentality.
Yeah. I have to say, this scene always really got me. I think you just handled it so well from the perspective of a young man being sheltered, but being wise enough to sort of know what's happening, and we're seeing things we're understanding things without seeing them.
Right.
And the tone of it was so, you know, he's obviously so bright that he's put the pieces together, even though his parents are trying to put a layer between him and the suffering. I thought it was very well handled
Thank
from
you.
a performance and blocking perspective.
Well, it definitely had two pieces of thinking that were very up the front of my mind. One being not to in any way undermine the emotional intelligence of the character and kids in general, but also to absolutely stay in our protagonist's point of view, which I think is so crucial and is one of the mistakes you can definitely make as a first-time director, but as a director generally, which is to sort of be pulled or seduced by, you know, different characters, when at the end of the day you have to figure out who the audience are going to tether themselves to and let that character pull them through.
Right.
This is my lovely wife Jessica playing the bookstore owner here, opposite the wonderful Lonnie Chavis. Love this shot, you know, here, just looking down on him as he's trying to do everything he can to save his mom. That's one of the themes that just really, when I first read Emma Nadell's script, I related to so much. Having had a wonderful mother myself who has since passed away and who also was ill before she did, you know, I know as a kid I would have done anything and everything to help her, let alone under these kind of circumstances. And I remember one of our first conversations, Matt, you also had a challenging time with your mum early in life.
Yeah.
And that was something we really connected over in relation to the story.
Yeah, and just trying to capture it in a way that told that experience and the things you hold on to in your mind, because you don't remember the exact mechanics of what happened, but you remember the look, the shared looks, and the moments of peeking in. I thought were really well done. You know, that you're always looking at it, not in the forefront. You know, it's always kind of the memory of those things can be very selective.
Especially as a child who is,
Yeah,
you're trying to
exactly.
be sheltered from stuff. And so, you know, and children see so much more than we give them credit for.
For sure.
And that's what we wanted to really capture with this kid. He sees everything, and he's a very deep thinker. Remember this shot?
Oh, man.
Wow.
The lengths
Yeah.
the lengths one will go to work with a logging truck.
I know. That truck had to sort of do a round each time.
Yeah.
And we had to wait for it, and then it started raining, and Lonnie was on this scooter, and it got a bit slippery, and we was worried that was it still safe? You know, so much thought and work went into that moment. This is another great moment, the introduction of Maya Miller's character Jo, and we really talked about this mysterious girl and the introduction of her, especially in this amazing location we found with this old paper mill. I'm really happy with this scene.
By a lake called Wild Horse.
It was such a good combination of location and the right casting and the right costume and the right writing and all of those things. You know, you just look at that and you think, wow, that's really
If you want to hear the rest of the story, you gotta pay.
well put together.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we sort of had to rise to the level of the location in some ways. It was
Very true.
so kind of compelling, and it wasn't anything like what was on the page. But that's the alchemy and the magic of what can happen sometimes. Yeah, and you know, just to take a moment to talk about the beauty, in my opinion, of Lonnie Chavis's performance in this. Just a kid with enormous amounts of emotional intelligence. We were just so fortunate to find him.
Thank you.
I always loved that back and forth.
Yeah,
Clearly burning.
Trying to find the lighter moments in this house was, you know, a real truffle hunting kind of endeavor, because, you know, there's no getting away from it. A mother that's sick in the home is a heavy theme to have in an adventure movie, but we didn't want to ever shy away from the truth.
Yeah. This is great work from Lonnie too, with just you know, scenes with nothing to say, and he just puts it all in his face and in his body. It's really impressive to watch, I think.
Yeah, it's proper cinema acting, where you really are leaning into this being a visual medium, and he gives you all the story in that face, in his demeanor, and it's there's a lot of story, actually, funnily enough, happening in this moment. Again, this is where you're trying to stay away from anything that feels like exposition, whilst also sort of bringing the audience along from an informational point of view. Day one of our shoot, Matt. This was day one.
There it was.
Yeah.
One of my better day ones, I have to say, truthfully. I think you were wise to sort of schedule it or request. Maybe it was just Mr. Molina was only available. I don't know, but this was like the right thing to start with.
Yes, I agree. It was a combination of things. You know, we knew we only had Alfred for 2 days, and this location as well, very specific location. That house was just perfect. But it also felt like, you know, because it was a quite contained part of our story in terms of Mr. Bussey, as played by Fred, telling our hero the story of the Waterman. It sort of felt like a good way to start, you know, a good launch pad.
It's not a prank. I just want to know if the
And sort of set up the style. I've always found that sort of setting up the style of a film can't happen in a vacuum. Like until you are physically filming, it can be very challenging to know exactly where the rubber hits the road, so to speak.
Yeah.
And and I think that this was it captured the right amount of kind of magic and quirkiness, and you know, I think from a set decoration and art department perspective, all of the things were contained there and set the right mood to guide us for the rest of the way.
Yeah, everything we were trying to do thematically sort of happens in this house. You know, the juxtaposition of reality and fantasy, the juxtaposition of the challenges he's facing and the adventure he's about to go on. You know, the fact that this is a slightly elevated environment, even though it's still real. Even in the lighting, you know, we've sort of heightened things just a little bit as the film starts to segue from reality to fantasy and imagination.
So,
This is the fourth film I have done with Mr. Molina. I did a film called As You Like It that Kenneth Branagh directed. He was actually in a film that I directed, a short film I directed called Big Guy. And then we did a film called Don't Let Go together for Blumhouse. And I told him we were making The Waterman, and he said, well, if you have a need of a fat Italian to stand in a doorway, I'm your man. I said, I don't need a fat Italian, but I need a storytelling quirky dude. And he said, tell me when and where. Love, Fred.
Yeah, an incredible contribution here, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he grew his hair out and that beard for this.
was Edward Shaw.
And yeah, just does this so well. Got one of those voices as well that just really you lean into.
Yeah, for the literal storytelling of it, I think an incredible narrator.
Yeah.
Edward found a rock vein known as
So we had a great company out of Oregon called Bent, led by Shell White, who did the animation for us. And this is one of those moments when you're making a film where, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. In the original script, this was written as a live action sequence that we were going to have to shoot, you know, 100 years in the past. And obviously that was going to be a very expensive endeavor. And so animation became our solve, and it actually was a great thing for kind of setting an imaginative tone, not just for the film, but also tying it to our protagonist and his love of graphic novels.
saw it himself.
Yeah, I love how the style of it really fit with everything that was on camera with Lonnie's
And he declared the
artwork
war deceased.
Yeah.
as well.
That was until
Yeah.
You sort of get a picture of him drawing it in his own head.
That's
you
exactly
know,
right.
As you move through this.
Exactly right. Yeah, we had the same artist doing his sketches as did the animation for that exact reason, to really give us a sense that we are seeing both the real world and the imagined world through his eyes.
he hung black stones all around the
Your
forest
first glimpse of the
searched.
title role.
People thought he was
Yes.
except for
Yeah, and they did this in a really inventive way. They shot some of this stuff live action, and then it had these really amazing artists sort of
they said it was proof.
doing this by hand, frame by frame.
Legend has it that he
You know,
stole
that
it.
I happen to know that deer was something they had to invent. Obviously, harder to get a deer to do exactly what you want under controlled circumstances.
Even if all that was
But
left
Right.
were bones.
yeah, that was Ted Rooney who played the waterman. That was him lying on a chair doing the swimming action, which they then transposed into water.
Some say blood magic.
So good.
My father
Yeah.
swore it had something to do with that rock vein.
This was another moment where I sort of felt, oh, okay, we're not faking it. We are actually making a movie. You know, you have
Right.
an actor of Fred's stature doing great work. It's day one. It's actually, and I felt so bad for Lonnie. This house had
I tried to go
cats
up there to the lake.
living
Oh
in
my
it.
lord! Oh, I had forgotten all about that.
Yeah.
Wow, he
had
was really struggling. I remember actually.
really struggling. He had a very bad allergic reaction, and so he really muscled through this and did a great job. But you remember his eyes were watering.
Yeah,
He was-
watering, and he had to. I remember he sort of was drowsy for a while. It was
Yeah.
really, yeah.
Yeah.
He pulled off a miracle here for sure.
No one knows where
Yeah.
to find him.
Yeah.
No one except me.
I've always found with actors like Fred, I get this strange sort of
That is a copy.
fear and loathing feeling right before a shot where you're going to have an actor of that, you know, sort of stature. Much in the way I feel about, you know, when you step on the camera and you're sort of working with a stand-in trying to line it up and you're going like, oh, I don't know, is this,
Right.
you know, a lot of self-doubt and loathing. And then one of you guys or Rosario, Lonnie, then you guys step in and you go, oh, right, we are still making a film. You know, you forget that there's something to the magic of screen presence
Big time.
that brings shots alive, you know?
Yeah. This actually was our real first day, if you
True.
remember, Matt.
The
it was-
water unit.
Yeah, it was billed as a, what did they call it? Pre-shoot day.
Pre-shoot, yeah.
But we were
Water
we were-
elements.
Yeah, we were in a pool shooting that stuff, and that was actually before we started shooting officially. And that also was a good way to start to do something. You know, it was quite difficult.
Yeah, it was very, yeah. It certainly wouldn't have fit into the schedule in any kind of elegant way because you would have lost a whole day to it. So
Yeah, yeah.
with our
One of my favorite
was
moments
quite a-
in the film. This
quite a
we had-
shocking.
Yeah, we had to do a trick there of a person with an actual shaved head, and then we had Rosario in a bald cap, and the back of her hair, it was impossible to make it perfect in the back because she had all this hair, but we did a kind of sleight of hand there of the real person stepping out and Rosario stepping in. It was a old school in-camera trick.
The old switcheroo.
That's it.
This is an interesting moment, actually, because it's like as the tensions are boiling over, you know, between your stress of, you know, losing a wife and a mother, and you know, it's all kind of coming to the surface.
Yeah, and we really agonized over that moment because at one point it was that I slap him to make him stop hyperventilating,
Right,
and then we
sure.
just thought, oh, that's just too intense. I don't know how a character like Amos, who I'm playing, makes it back from that for the audience, and so we ended
Right.
up going with the shouting at him. But that was a decision on the day, actually. It wasn't as written in the script. I'm glad we did that pivot.
Yeah, it still feels very like, still gives you a little shock.
Yeah, it's just about intense enough, but without sort of tipping over into
Right.
feeling abusive, you know. But here we are back in this great location. You know, this is, you know, when I said it is an adventure, this is the kind of stuff I had in my mind, you know. Just really setting up the journey.
Yes.
Where'd you get it?
Amaya and Lonnie had just wonderful chemistry, in my opinion, in this.
Yes.
In this, she's actually so much sweeter as a person than she is on screen, playing Joe. You know, she's such a sweet.
I'm Joe.
Yeah, the emotional intelligence of these young people has always struck me. Like I just can't imagine myself at that age having a clue on how to like
For now, till I save up enough money to
work
get my
in
own
that
place.
way, you know?
A few stores that cost more than $1.
I
It's
know.
really
I'm telling you.
I know. This is what's about to. This scene that's about to take place in the tent is another favorite of mine, and I remember you and I, in our scouting bus, you know, discussing shots, and this is, for me, one of our triumphant moments. The idea of sort of putting them in this pressure cooker that literally feels
Right.
like they are in an oven, as they are about to be spat out, and. Yeah, talk to me, Matt, about how this was for you, because lighting wise, this is obviously very specific.
Yeah, it's hard. You know, we went through various tent options.
Yes.
Lawrence was bringing sort of every other day. It felt like there was a new tent presentation. You know, with the shape and the. You know, it felt to me it's almost like a Nicholas Refn kind of scene where you have this like very heavy color. You have this sort of geometry that's very specific, and making sure that the lenses are at the exact heights. So when you're cutting across, it feels very much like you're in that conversation. They're looking straight to lens. It's direct address almost. So it was all about sort of shape and finding a color that would carry with the lighting, because obviously the daylight has its color, and you are putting the tent as a sort of transitional piece in between the light and the face. So we had to kind of find, plus they have, you know, very different reflectivity. So it was about what would work for Lonnie and what would work for Amaya. You know, it took a little bit of figuring out, especially when you're working with a heavy saturation like that. Look at this face. I just want to stop right now for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. I mean,
Oh dear.
I will forever ingrained in my mind when that face walked into that shot. I just thought, good heavens.
I'll take it, Matt. I'll take it. Yeah, it was tricky, man, to both direct and be on screen. The hardest days for me were when I would have the privilege of just directing for like a morning, and then suddenly someone would come towards me with a costume. And I was like, what are you doing?
You're like,
yeah, I'm in
"No."
this thing. I know. Like, you know, tapping your head and rubbing your belly. It was quite something. But
I've done a couple of films with directors that have had to perform in various sizes of roles, either small or leading roles, and you handled it with much more grace than many. Well, what normally happens is it's a real frustration, so it can bubble up, either affecting the performance or affecting the directing.
Yeah.
And I think that you were able to sort of shed it when you had to shed it. And
thank you.
the Chuck scene.
The Chuck scene. Now, this is a favorite of mine, partly because of your challenge you set yourself to have Chuck in the shot in every no matter the angle, Chuck had to be in the shot.
Correct.
And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is Matt's way of just breaking up his day, but it actually really is helpful. But if you look at this scene, there's not a single shot that Chuck isn't somewhere in it.
Chuck is in every frame of this scene.
Why
But
do you want
sort
to
of-
do that? I'm curious.
I have a strange. There's an old kind of, and it kind of comes from like a little bit of love of kind of the European filmmaking, where there's sort of arbitrary rules and certain time periods and styles of filmmaking where people just write down a bunch of rules about
Right.
how they want their films to feel. New Wave or Dogma 95. These, and it feels like sometimes you have these scenes that could be done in a more traditional way, but if you install sort of not arbitrary, but like goals to the scene and photographically, it can create an interesting effect, which is just that you feel like this guy is right there all the way through that, and it creates a little bit of something unsaid.
It definitely created a tone. It created a feeling, which is what you're
Right.
looking for in cinema. An audience probably will never pick up on what it is. They will now
Right.
if they're listening to this. But, it's never would have been a choice I would have made. I appreciated it, though, especially in the edit. There was
Right.
something very satisfying to see these kids navigating around a central force that they had to sort of had to get through, get past, get by, and it really helped with that feeling in the scene. This is another scene talking about. Borrowing from elsewhere. I think we had both just seen When They See Us. And again, our friend Ava DuVernay had shot some of these interrogation scenes with this sort of low angle on folks. These are hellacious scenes to shoot. Two people at a desk talking about things of this nature, but it just adds this level of interest having the camera at that angle.
Yeah, it gives it. There's a lot of craft in that. What seems like the most simple things, whereas you arrive here and this stuff is easy to do because everywhere you look, there's kind of something magical and huge and vistas and and then you sit two people down and that seems like it should be easy,
Right.
but to make it anything outside of pedestrian is often very challenging.
And it was easy to do or easier, I should say, in terms of pointing the camera, and there was always something interesting. But my goodness, to get the camera to these locations, that wasn't so easy, and which is why I think you picked the cameras we use. The ability to have these smaller cameras, so that when we put them on our back, it was a bit more
Literally on our backs.
Literally.
I mean, everybody carrying. I remember. Watching poor Bailey at some point was picking up cases to move them up it was just a complete team effort to get to. But truthfully, shooting in the forest, when you're doing it is so lovely, but scouting it is really hard because the old saying, you can't see the forest for the tree. You literally go to these places and you think, to find your spots and to even have the nomenclature to, remember each place we would go to would get some kind of funny name
Yes,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Like Tree Stump Creek, and you know what I mean? They all had like a certain name. We would give them to try to figure out how these where these scenes would play out, because otherwise you just are literally lost in the expanse of it.
And also, you were so spoilt for choice because there was something interesting everywhere you looked. It required
Sure.
an element of discipline to sort of make a choice and stick with it. Especially in this amazing, Pacific Northwest setting that just was so rich with possibility. Yeah, but those scenes in the forest were the kind of thing, for me, when I was thinking about the film, I had in my head. And to be perfectly honest, what we ended up getting was so much more incredible. That was a really wonderful thing. And this is where what I said earlier really starts to come into play. Now juxtaposing those colors of the forest, the expanse of it, the light of it, and then oscillating back and forth to this house, which is sort of being oppressed by illness and a degree of sadness, and it's reminding us why Gunnar is out there doing what he's doing.
Certainly.
Hey, babe.
And it gives you a sense of the urgency of your character kind of having to figure out how he's going to get this back on the rails, while not
Right.
upsetting his wife, who's ill, and getting his son back, and all of these things. It's a lot of
Yeah.
complexity to it,
It is, and one of the masterstrokes for me, and I will give myself the credit for this, was casting Rosario Dawson, who, you need, or you always needed, the beating heart of this movie, the person who symbolizes love, the person who is the glue of this family, the person who Gunnar is out there fighting for, and you needed to feel the force of that person. And my goodness, just turn the camera on her and it's just all there.
Kid riding around on an electric
It's funny, her and I really, I feel so
He's my son.
fortunate in my career to have spent the amount of time around her that I have. And then we're actually about to start again in August, and I just think
Right.
every time I'm going into a production that she's a part of, I just feel so safe, strangely, which I know is a weird word for a cinematographer to say about an artist and a performer. But I just know that we have such a synchronicity in what we're trying to do, whether it's a film like this, which is very much composed and labored is the wrong word, but that is focused, versus some of our other work, which is much more free and loose and improvisational. And no matter what, I always just feel so connected to what she's doing. So it's this was an amazing feather in our cap together
Yeah, she's a
to
real
be able
pro.
to do this film. Amazing.
Pro. This is one of those examples of us naming an environment. I think we call this the Opera House because of
Opera
that.
House.
Yeah, because of that hanging rock. It sort of reminded us a little bit of the Opera House in Australia, in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah, in Sydney, yeah.
Again, I love what we managed to do with light in this film. The moments where we really capitalize on using natural light, not very much light, without losing our subjects, but, keeping that sort of foreboding feeling in the forest.
Yeah, this required a little bit of ingenuity. There's a technique where you actually create an artificially high volume of light on the actors in order to reduce the exposure in camera enough that what's behind them here, this blue, for us to light these forests at night was just not realistic given how far away they were from civilization. So what you see back here is actually daylight. It's actually still daytime. It's passive daytime, and we basically tinted just the actors, opened up the background to camera, and then just absolutely almost crushed them. It's amazing that the performances are as elegant as they are, because if you recall, there's sort of this wall of light right beside them. So when you calculate all those things in camera, you get the night effect.
Yeah.
It was sort of like it's an old 20s trick, I think.
But that goes back to what I was saying earlier on in this commentary about why I really loved you for this, is because of that ingenuity, that sort of, some of that old school technique, but it never ever means that you're sacrificing the big film feel. And that's a gift of yours. I will never forget when we were doing Government Cheese, you putting the camera on a pole and then, swinging it around, me having to duck the pole and then be up in time to be on camera. I mean, how we didn't decapitate ourselves doing that movie, I just don't know. But it's that kind of thing that really gets me going. And, the audience will never know. But if it works, it's wonderful to see.
That's all that they remember is what's in the shot.
Yeah. So, we're about to go into a sequence now, Matt. I don't know if you remember, but
I remember.
This is quite different on the page. This sequence we're about to go into of Lonnie, who is playing Gunnar, going into the forest, and it used to be a sequence that would culminate in Joe encroaching upon him and him swinging the sword, and it was going to be far more lit. But I sort of had this epiphany a night or two beforehand that I wanted it so dark, in the way that my bedroom was so dark that I would think that a coat hanging on the back of my door was definitely some kind of ghost. But the only way we could do it was to purely do it with the torchlight. And I remember saying that to you and you saying, what the hell are you talking about?
Well, but I think it speaks to your visual acuity and sensibility that even maybe you haven't had, film after film after film of these sort of technical conversations, but you came to me, you understood that the ask was non-conventional.
Yes.
And sort of posed a challenge of how does this, and I said, well, we have to, I don't know if you remember, but we had to hike a great distance to get away from any lighting.
Yeah.
And the base camp and all these things, and really get to an environment that had no ambient light at all.
Yeah.
Where you're only sort of tasting the foliage in the foreground. We had our Best Boy Grip, I believe, was about 7 feet tall, and he installed the coat to do the foreground wipes with the camera.
Yes.
And, this stuff takes a lot of boldness. My training would have suggested to me that this was too much, and then to have you kind of embolden us to go down that path is, those are the best moments.
I love it. I love it. I really, really love it. And I thank you for coming with me on it. I mean, that's part of the ignorance of inexperience that I even took us down this path. But I'm just so glad because
the results are fantastic.
Yeah, really eerie scene, and it was just what I had in my head. So very, very, very happy about that. This is one of our ladies in costume who was mortified when I picked her to do this. She couldn't bear the idea of being on screen.
The costume folks always are dressed the best. What are you going to do? They just have,
I know.
This was so nice to have you two play a scene together, I thought.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was a very simple scene, but it just felt, felt right. Felt very familiar.
Yeah, well, Jess and I have been married for over 20 years now, and this is a film made through our company. Our production company is one of the companies that put this together. And making movies is a real family affair for us. When people hear the end credit song at the end, my eldest son actually produced that song and just sings it, and they put it together. So yeah, my kids get a lot of mileage out of this because mommy and daddy are pretending not to know each other, which is super weird for them.
Yeah, it's I mean, I even think that performers and actors who know each other really well for years and years, it's hard to get that freshness on the screen, I would imagine. I mean, I've never done it, but
It is. But
to
also,
have to start
I think
from
if there's,
scratch every time.
if there's a level of trust, you can sort of really push it. But It's hard not to be self-conscious, but I think we got away with it. This is one of those scenes in which the beauty of this forest really comes to the fore. This location we found of these two towering trees next to each other, and just getting to shoot a scene in the midst of it. What a dream. If we were doing Star Wars, all of this would be built, wouldn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Plates and set pieces on blue screen.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was...
It's funny because I was saying this to somebody
Say it.
the other day, that sort of work in the fantasy realm, Marvel, Lucasfilm, all these things have actually made it harder, I think, to shoot location films.
Right.
Because the expectation is that it is done
Your mom and
on stage in a composited environment. And
Right.
I think I was saying to Ava with regards to Spider-Man, that I traveled we traveled the entire continent of Europe. We were in in New York and all these places. And sometimes you look at the stuff and you just think, did they go there, or is that just a plate and it's
Right.
really hard to sell the reality of a location in this day and age.
Right. Right. Which
and
is
I think
why
it's done.
but that's also why we really wanted to almost show off the environment.
Yeah, exactly,
To
exactly.
really kind of make you feel like you're there, because so often you're pointing the cameras in ways that hides the fact that there are going to be seams. And
Exactly.
we didn't have to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's very true. This is an incredible piece right here.
Yeah.
Our stallion, Mr. Moriarty,
The waterman?
doing
Yeah.
some of his finest work in the film there, I think.
And also my ode to Bad Boys.
Yeah, it had to be. I mean, it was such a huge moment. Because this is really a tipping point, right? Where the fantasy is now becoming, the things they've been feeling are happening.
Yeah, and my goodness, what we put our actors through here. These were real horses, and you'll see a shot coming up where we put our actors on the back of moving mobiles.
Camera car.
Right there, camera car.
Yeah.
And he is in that exact proximity to those horses.
Amazing. I have to say, tip our hat to the animal wranglers
yeah.
on this production. Were absolutely best in the world, in my opinion. I mean, every
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
from cockroaches or beetles,
Yeah.
all the way up from the smallest insect to the biggest Mustang.
I know.
It was amazing to watch them control that speed and those horses, and it never felt out of control. It never felt it just really spot on work that elevated the film, I think.
I would agree. We really were so lucky to have them. I believe they're even out of Oregon, and they were just fantastic. I mean, again, my ignorance of what I was hoping to get out of
Right.
those scenes, and that you could just see them go, huh, okay, and then they would deliver it every time.
Maybe we should go
Yeah.
I love this shot because this is exactly the kind of thing I had in my head when I would say to you, I really want them to be small in a big space, just to illustrate the task they had set themselves. And that was one of those shots that really
Go
illustrated
northwest,
that.
We'll eventually find the river that will lead us to Wild Horse.
Yeah, and that symbolic moment where Gunnar, starts to lead the way. It's part of his rites of passage. There's, it's subtle, but suddenly he's now leading, and we are in the second half of the film.
Yeah. Such a great transition here.
Snow.
Yeah, this is literally that. It's a transition from reality into fantasy. And
Everyone who's seen the film actually has asked me about this moment, which is all practically done, strangely.
Yeah. Those were made, I think that those flakes are made of corn. And poor Lonnie, every time he would look up, they would get in his mouth, nose, and eyes. And we would have to take a moment to flush out his eyes because all those specks would get in there. He made it look fun, but it actually wasn't that fun for him.
Yep.
And we have our our ode to Shawshank Redemption coming up. I always wanted this shot in the film, and you rendered it so beautifully.
And that's an example of just sort of stumbling through that little clearing of 3 trees, you know,
Yeah.
and sort of, however, in the combination of the collaboration, you think, oh, wouldn't it be nice if,
Right.
you know, literally having to see through the forest to find those pockets that,
Yeah. And you inevitably have an image in your head, and then the forest either doesn't give you what you want or gives you something so much better. And that's why you need that discipline to sort of go, okay, we're going to make a decision. Otherwise, you could just scout this kind of movie forever.
forever, yeah, just never shoot, just still scout.
Yeah. Just keep shouting. Again, Rosario just doing beautiful work of reminding us the stakes of this film. Gosh, remember this location.
Unbelievable.
You know,
Unbelievable.
literally a fallen tree that we found and thought, yikes, this is gold. And
Just so massive feeling. I mean, the scale of it just completely. It's hard to. It's just really remarkable. The nature in this film is unbelievable.
hard incline on which to shoot, though. My goodness.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, because we had to build platforms, we had to do all sorts of things to be able to get the cameras on there.
Yeah, Sean Devine, our key grip, was very accommodating with the needs of working in these environments. And just, you know, filmmaking now is so complex on so many levels with regards to all these departments doing all these things that you do have to distill down what you're going to need and simplify in order to be successful, I think, on any production. Like, you just have to know the core of what it is and have only those things. Because if you can't make choices, you end up burning your resources and energy in places that isn't ending up on the screen. You know?
Yeah. Well, you were incredible with that. I've never worked with a DP who
Take classes or something?
the very second the scene is done or the shot is complete, everyone's going, "Where's Matt? Where's Matt?" Matt is on the next. He's on the next location. I mean, you know, you want to talk about someone who keeps it moving. My goodness, you would never take a lunch break. You were always literally waiting for the rest of us to finish our lunch, which was very motivating to finish your lunch quickly, get back to set. You know, it meant that we finished this film, I think, a day or two earlier than scheduled, you know, which is unthinkable for a film of this scale. But that's you move nimbly, my friend, and it was great.
Oh, well, it's all in the interest of what we're experiencing now, truthfully.
Yeah, very true.
This was I can't believe how hard you all, you know, the collaboration with Pixamundo and the you know, this stuff is at the level of everything we do at Marvel, you know, in terms of the interactivity and the practical elements and the way in which the insects are, you know, shot really in close up at certain points. You know, it is those folks at Pixo are, I think, you know, some of the best that I've seen.
Yeah, they were complete geniuses because this is incredibly tough stuff to do. A sequence that's coming up of these bugs that will eventually cascade down and flow down that sort of ravine. We'll get to that shortly. But yeah, Pixamundo, our VFX house, just really, really fantastic. Going into this scene, you know, this to me is just vintage Rosario Dawson. You know, bringing us back to reality, back to the situation. She is both fragile, frail, strong, and just full of fortitude. I mean, like oscillating between strength and fragility on a dime. Just really great acting.
And the physicality of it is so, it never leaves. Like, even when she's coming up, you know, to you, in a confrontational way, the body doesn't change.
Right.
You know, it's still living in that. It's amazing to watch. It's amazing to watch.
It really is. So many of us who came to this film came with our own experiences of family members being ill. You know, Rosario's dad has had his own challenges as well. And so, you know, 1 in 4 people, I think, is something like that, are going to have cancer. And it's just a really tough thing that anyone who lives long enough will have some kind of experience with, either personally or peripherally. And, you know, some of that worked its way into this film, and that's where some of this reality kicks in. But just, I really love her. She's so great. But as we were talking about before, you know, I mean, this is all computer generated imagery here, and just so seamlessly done.
Yeah, they so impressive. Because when you're doing these things, you're kind of doing them in a vacuum, and you're imagining what it's going to be, but you don't really see. Then, of course, you're editing without it being what it is, and then you see the finished thing, and you think, "Wow, I'm glad we had faith." Because I would imagine in editorial, you start to think, "Good heavens, if this doesn't pan out, this scene is not going to work," you know? And
yeah, well, it's one of the scenes before we did the VFX where anyone you showed it to would be like, "So what's supposed to happen in that moment?" And then you tell them, and they'd be like, "Hey, really?" You know, you could see them all just thinking, "You are setting yourself up for some major failure there."
pain and suffering.
Yeah, and you know, the guys from Pixar really stepped up for us. Remember, this is one of those moments where we found this rock, and you know, just another great location that just the position of the camera as well here. You know, somehow I just totally believe her vulnerability. This shot I love.
Right.
You know,
And that's it's only 6 feet off the ground, you know,
Right.
and it's adjacent to a path because of where we had to end up. We had to find something that was going to be on the way. We couldn't deviate. And you sort of happen upon these things and think, well, if the camera was just right here, you might believe that they're elevated, and something about their distance from the trees. The other thing you're starting to do here, which truthfully was another lesson for me that I'll carry forward, is the transition in color.
Yeah.
Which is something I never do. You know, I've never really done a film that has an aesthetic deviation.
Right.
I don't know why that is. It's just never been in part of my thinking. I've always thought about films as having a look that didn't change, and I think that, you know, part of your thinking pushing us to that place, and I think Sean's work in the color really did elevate the film and elevate the believability of the imminent danger that they're describing here on the call, and it feathers in nicely. It's very well done and hard to do, truthfully. I mean, to veer off of a look that has so much kind of color and vibrance and end up in a very kind of desolate, smoke-filled, gray environment is hard to do well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's that thing of, you know, thinking of the film in its totality and what it is that the protagonist's journey actually is. You know, he is going from the vibrancy of his mother to the reality of loss, an imminent loss. And we then have the literal fact that there's this fire brewing, as we see here, that is literally, you know, a bit like cancer. It is engulfing its environment. And, you know, you in the same way that we wanted the intimate scenes in the house to feel more dark and more claustrophobic. We wanted to make the forest feel big and full of possibility, but we also wanted to create an environment where the smoke feels like it is causing a kind of claustrophobia. And I didn't want it to suddenly shift from, the vibrant colors we had earlier on to sort of a more smoke-filled feeling. So yes, that scene you mentioned earlier is where we start just dialing down the tones and sort of dialing up the imminent threat.
One man cheated death. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have given him the map.
I appreciate your help. I gotta go find my son.
Yeah, there's a waterfall. Horsetail Falls. If you can make it up the ridge, maybe you can cut into the lake.
Thank you.
Fred giving the information as we speak. I remember this moment as well. Us having the camera on a crane here.
Right.
We talked about that a lot, and that smoke again was Pixamundo doing their work to give us a sense of what Amos is going into. Remember us talking about this street, having to close it off.
Fast and Furious.
As close as we got, anyway.
Anybody who doesn't know about David Oyelowo's driving, watch this scene. Because I've been in cars with 30-year stunt professionals, and they haven't driven like this.
That guy's so crazy. I couldn't believe he took a step towards the car.
He's crazy. Yeah, you have a lead foot, my friend. There's no question.
Oh yeah, well I did a film called Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise, and once you've played,
you
with
learn
that
from the
guy,
best.
You learn from the best. There's no going back. Again, and Pixamundo doing great work. We scouted this location in around about November when the snow had been melting off the mountains, and that river was really rushing. By the time we came back to shoot about 4 or 5 months later, that river was a trickle. So this
and it was one of the more exciting ones, truthfully.
Yeah.
Even at a trickle, it's still it was challenging because at the time of year that we were going, it really wasn't the runoff season, right?
No, it wasn't. So all this running water that absolutely needed to be the case for us to feel the danger is, again, Pixamundo doing great work. And I've been told by VFX folks that water is one of the hardest things to do. Mm-hmm. And it is pretty seamless here.
Mm-hmm. And another great, these scenes are just such a statement to the care and dedication and collaboration of so many different departments, because to do a scene like this in a film like this requires between stunts and VFX and camera and costume and so many different people working to achieve this illusion. Obviously you start in a place of, well, what would it take to drop a log across the river?
Right.
And slowly you realize that is never going to happen. And so you have to build strategies to create an experience that's both believable for the artists on camera, so that they're creating a real rendition of the thing, even though they're hanging over blue screen for a lot of it, or they're on a log that doesn't go more than 6 feet. That first piece on location, remember, it sort of went for a while and then just stopped and had a little piece of blue on the end there behind Amaya.
So this is all them about 5 feet off the ground, in a completely different environment. And it's all composited together and,
But then also cheated on location, like that shot is on location. So we wanted to reduce the shot count so that Pixamundo would have the resources to spend on the bigger shots. So we're cheating a lot of it in situ at the location to try to limit how many things they were going to have to composite down the line.
Totally. Horsetail Falls. That's a real place, and just beautiful locations. we had all over that region in Oregon.
You found something?
The wonderful Maria Bello, who the reason she's in this film is I met her at the Sundance Film Festival. She found out I was making a film. She said, I like the things you put out into the world. I want to be in your movie. I said, I don't have a role for you. She said, look, I'm in your movie. Let's figure it out. So that role was originally a guy, and it's now Maria Bello.
Right.
Yeah, but where exactly?
You know,
Yeah.
you don't say no to Maria Bello. I mean, come on.
Correct. Yeah. Not something that I would advise doing.
No. Matt, talk to us about getting to this location with the
Unbelievable.
camera equipment. I mean, yikes.
I mean, do you remember the chicken wire? We had to spread chicken wire and bolt it down over all the rocks because of how wet everything was and the dew. And we're carrying, literally one piece at a time. And I think it was about a quarter mile or maybe
Yeah.
just over a quarter mile
Yep.
straight uphill.
Straight up. Straight up.
So-
That was a very, very clear indication of the dedication that this group had towards the film, because that was not easy at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I love this guy's performance. It's hard to come in 3/4 of the way to a movie and give the feel that this guy brings in playing Joe's dad, and local actor to Oregon, and just really just brought it. Really fantastic. Very proud of my actors in this film.
Josephine here. Love to talk to her.
And these are really hard scenes to do. Again, it's sort of the two people in a doorway, two people in a, it's to make them feel like something real and dynamic is really, there's a lot of screen craft that goes into
Some records.
all of it,
Yeah.
especially from a
Josephine got
performance
15 stitches on
perspective.
her neck last month. How'd you
Big
get that
time.
and editorially too, you really end up working those scenes, I imagine, or at least my editor friends always tell me.
Maybe we should go back
I
to
spend
what
3 days on two people in a doorway, and then I can do an action scene in an afternoon.
I know, but
Yeah. Oh yeah.
said I don't
Oh
want
yeah.
to
It's so interesting what you end up, spending a ton of time on, and the things that just cut together like butter and just pretty much stay that way all the way through. This scene actually was one of those where there were times where the emotion went bigger than it is in the film. There were times where
no, it's not.
it just ran a bit long. There are times where we had this as a scene in and of itself, and we had the scene with Joe's dad as a completely separate scene, and then times where we were into cutting between the two. We just did so many things to get to the point where this felt satisfying.
You have no idea what I've been through.
Remember how the sun really killed us on this? It was going
Oh, man.
in and out and in and out
Care about
of
your
the clouds.
So challenging. It's always the thing with these sort of longer scenes, and there really is no option to control it in these environments. So you're really kind of trying to position them and move them a little bit each take to try to keep them in the right consistency.
We need to find the waterman, Joe.
But often you end up with a great performance in less than ideal light, and it just has to work in editorial somehow. And the magic of the emotion of the scene, you cut to a sunny face and then you cut to a shady face, and
Okay, I don't need you.
it works, because you're in the scene.
Yeah, and sometimes you've just gotta realize that if the scene is working, the audience are gonna be less focused on that stuff than you are.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
you just,
correct.
You just gotta go with it. But amazing location. Just gotta give a shout out to Peter Bart, our composer, who just again did just astounding work on this film. I met him in the most unorthodox of ways. I was doing a recording of Spot the Dog, a children's book, and he told me he composes scores for movies, and I said, yeah, right, you do. I sent him the script. He sent me 8 full tracks he did with an orchestra out in Belgium, and
Wow.
that's how I ended up picking him to do this film. Just great.
Amazing.
His first English-speaking film, I believe.
Wow.
So
This is all part of, you remember, scene 72 part, which was at the end of every
Yes.
every single call sheet ended with 72 part.
Yes, yes. Which
David running through woods in
Yes.
whatever scenario.
Wherever we were, just throw the costume on me and I'm going to run. And we're going to figure out where we're going to cut it into the movie.
Yeah.
And it became famously known in our world anyway as 72 Part. That's a stunt man going down there like that, and we tried to make it as seamlessly as possible. It always amazes me. Lonnie was on a wire here. It used to pull on his costume. He had a back pad that was very evident. All of it just erased out of the film.
Yeah, sometimes, you're rushing and it's really hard to get all the work done, and you just have to have faith that if we want the shot bad enough, they'll figure it out.
And you remember this shot, Matt? This wasn't in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Our Lonnie and Amaya were late to set, and we didn't know what to shoot.
Yeah.
People were playing cards in the house. I was like, "This is crazy. We're not.
We have
doing
to do
that.
something."
We have to do something." And we did that shot of Rosario just looking out, and it ended up being such a fantastic sort of bit of sinew within this sequence of just building the tension. You just never know. You never know where you're going to end up. Needing to tell the story, so shoot as much as you can. And
So
that was
true.
not scripted, So, but this is where the color transition that we had started marking about 25 minutes earlier starts to really pay off, when it now doesn't feel suddenly like we're making a big old left turn into this sequence.
Yeah.
And that was the idea, that you're slowly edging towards a sequence like this one,
Yeah.
where we reveal the waterman's heart. And this was editorially quite challenging, because we went through several iterations of how to introduce the waterman, how to introduce the heart, how to feel like we're going from something real into something imagined, and keeping that something that isn't necessarily totally explicitly stated. Really wanted to play with the audience's perception as to what is real and what is imagined here. This was all done on a sound stage inside not this bit, this was on location, and then suddenly we're now on a sound stage.
Whoa.
And again, the magic of the movies.
Every time. And just such a nice space, I think that Lawrence really, he heard the requirements, to shoot in a small space like this, and made it feel photographically the correct size and shape and, right mood, but still made it shootable, like for a 7-foot tall man and a child, and Matt Moriarty on a Steadicam, and, all these things that go into these scenes.
Absolutely.
It was all the right choices.
And I should talk about Blue Murray at this point, my editor, who was just really, really great with this sequence. We really struggled with how little or how much of the waterman we should see. It's incredible how much our imagination imbues a film with so much more if less is seen. And the more is seen, you sort of rob the audience of their desire to imagine. And so really had to play with that.
I've seen you walking.
How much we see, how much we don't.
And the coat is so well done, with the water on it and the...
Yeah. Nadine Haders, our costume designer, worked very hard on that. It's real fur, and the steam coming off it, we had to create artificially. Remember, that was a bit of a nightmare, because the steam had to be made with this device that would kind of go plop, 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 plop,
Yeah,
plop, plop,
make the sound useless.
Yeah, the boiling sound. So we had to figure our way around that.
My mom's sick.
Ted Rooney just did a great job
And if the
with
one
this.
makes heat death,
And our artists who made the prosthetics, this is all prosthetics. There's, you know, very little CGI augmentation here.
I'll do anything you ask.
And this is Ted Rooney's. Ted Rooney's voice sounds nothing like this. This is all him imbuing the character with 150 years of age and bitterness.
And I love just bringing in all the elements, the ash,
Yeah,
the Beatles, all the little bits that you've seen along the way
exactly.
are now coming in.
Yeah, and that again is Pixamundo. You know, they're bringing in the ash there, the shine of the rock, to really bring in that magical aspect. Just a great group of artisans it took to bring this all together. Love this moment where he stands to his full height and you go, whoa. And that is not in any way, I mean, it's purely done with the angle of the camera, this.
Yeah. And I love that there was never sort of the Hollywood shot of you know,
Yeah,
the reveal is still subtle. It's not, you know, just that one little piece where he catches a little from the side is all you ever really see.
yeah, and that's what we worked on a lot. It was actually, you know, when we went through the test screening process and, you know, we found that the Waterman was less scary than we wanted him to be because we showed him more. And you know, it was a real lesson in less is more.
I see.
Especially as we're playing with this idea of, is this imagined or is this real? Just those little flashes.
You did. For this.
It's so exciting when a VFX shot comes in and, you know, this just used to be like a black stone and then they managed to make it shine like that. You just go, whoa, that works.
It really does remind you of why you started doing this in the first place. You know, when you see some of that stuff and you just think, you know,
Yeah.
you're so excited by it.
I'm building this sequence. This wasn't in the script originally. We really felt the need to kind of try and get into Gunner's psychology as to why he had taken this journey for his mother. And so this was all stuff that, you know, we wrote to go with this now put together sequence that really just to bring you into something I think we can all relate to, which is some of the steps you take to believing some of the myths you believe because you need to, because you want something desperately like your mother to survive, you know, or whatever it is. Great work by Bent here, Shell White's company, to turn that into animation. And this is us now conflating all of the elements of the film, just bringing them together within the POV of our protagonist.
I thought this was such a magnificent solve, too, to the visual conundrum of how do you have him go into the hut. It's such a strong shot to Lonnie to just return to this as opposed to bringing him in and out and all those things. It was a strong choice.
Yeah, that one came to me one night lying in the bath, you know, just ruminating over how do we do that in a non-literal way that feels germane to this being the spillings out of this kid's imagination, you know?
Right.
Again, Pixar doing great work with the fire here. Obviously, we couldn't have these young people in an environment with that kind of fire, but feels
And
seamless.
only really a handful of shots that really have too much going on, and the rest is quite intimate and it's more a detail as opposed to you're not trying to show off a scene about forest fire. It's a scene about, you know, rescue.
I'll never forget this moment, Matt. Literally just before I run in there, I'm behind the monitor shouting at them, telling them, and it's the fire, and now look around, scream, and boom, I run into the scene from behind. I mean, it is like
It's amazing.
360 full-on immersive filmmaking. It was
Yeah.
just so exhilarating. Yeah,
Literally crossing from behind to in front of the camera.
literally. Moments before everything I'm saying here, I was behind the camera directing them. It's a cool feeling. Yeah, we always talked about this shot. It's one of those where you just have full faith in the VFX. You know, you throw up some blue screen and you think, please, Lord, I hope they can figure it out.
let it work.
Yeah.
And this was quite a nice augmentation of what was just 3 stunt doubles swimming across the
Yeah.
swimming across a swimming pool, and then you add some reflection and a little color, and
Yeah, debris. And it,
debris
it feels,
comes alive.
Feels like, yeah. And I was so impressed with how they made it feel like they were swimming away from those flames.
Right.
Just, again, a cool collaboration of all the elements coming together there. Yeah, this moment in the film is literally what it's all about. You know, for me, it's about how far you're prepared to go for those you love, and how love is about sacrifice. And to see that in an 11-year-old kid, you know, who's prepared to sacrifice it all for his mom. And then this dad, you know, I really relate to Amos, you know, his fallibility as a parent, but at the end of the day, he's a good man, he's a good dad. And he has some lessons to learn as well, you know. And so he has his own journey.
And the home as a backdrop, I think at this point takes a little turn and opens up a little bit, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
You try to visually integrate what's going on with the performances, you know.
Yeah. I love shots like that, where that was on a crane pulling back, and then you tell a bunch of stories just as you reveal thing after thing after thing in one shot. I always find that very satisfying.
Develops in a nice way.
This shot is stolen. That my head has been plastered onto a very different expression of me in that moment. We just needed a smiley father and son moment as we went. That people will not know until now, but that was a VFX shot putting that moment together.
Something I found in the woods.
I got you something to say sorry.
The apology between father and son. This used to be the last scene of the film.
Right.
Right. And we made the choice to flip this scene and what is now the last scene of the film. If I'm totally honest, it was to do with the pandemic. It was to do with the fact that the world has gone through this incredibly tough year. And even though the reality that we lose people to disease, to unforeseen circumstances is indeed a reality, it just felt, with the year we've all been through, that we needed something a bit more hopeful. Because the reality is, we all know that now. We all have been affected by this thing in ways that are either personal, peripheral, or certainly, there's no hiding kids from it. And so, we made this film before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, I felt, and partly from the advice of others as well, that to end in a place of hope, and to end thematically on the fact that all we have is today. We are not promised tomorrow, is more of the place to end this story at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a strong choice. It was a very different, you walk away in a very different way for having seen both versions,
It's incredible, isn't it? Just flipping two scenes
Yeah.
around. I mean, crazy.
Yeah. That's the magic, I suppose.
It really is. And it's also indicative of the fact that some of what you are leaving an audience with is not just the story, but a feeling, like an emotional feeling. You leave them in a certain state. And literally flipping those scenes left the audience in one state as opposed to another state. And we had to sort of make a choice as to which state we wanted to leave our audience in.
I think we're all gonna need extra cheese. Should have listened to Mom and kept the heat lower.
I think we should go.
Yeah. But also not outside the realm of believability, like the context
Yeah.
of the scenes. You know, you understand that she's perhaps on the mend, but still weak. You know, all the details still work. You know?
Absolutely. And you know, depending on if you're a grown-up or a young person, you also perceive this differently, as is the case with the whole film. You know, in the same way Gunnar sees snow when it's actually ash, in the same way that he sees the howling wild horses when it's just horses escaping a fire. You know,
Right.
in this moment, you're going to see a mother who may bounce back. And if you have a different experience of illness in your family, you may feel like there's an inevitability to the impending loss, and none of it is to be discounted as a way to think about it, because at the end of the day, that's what gets us through life, you know, is our ability to somehow rationalize the realities that life is hard. You know, and part of what makes life so beautiful is the inevitability of both loss and the fact that it is finite.
Well said.
Thank you, sir. This is my lovely wife, Jessie, singing this song that she wrote. My son, Asher, produced the track. And we thought we would end with Gunnar having completed his Detective Knox graphic novel, but he's somehow worked in a character called Joe. And they go on this adventure together.
Yeah, such a nice credit sequences are always interesting to, you know. Are you going to, you know, make a creative effort out of it, or are you going
Right.
to, you know, just kind of let it? Depends on the film, I suppose. But this was a nice one that I think people will enjoy and actually, you know, stick around for.
Yeah, I like to think so. And you know, when the credits roll, it's always that moment, especially now in a world of streaming where credit sequences have been so bastardized by, you know, it becoming a tiny box when the next thing is you
Skip
know.
ahead, exactly.
Yeah. So anytime you can make a credit sequence feel not just like a perfunctory, you know, exercise, I think is an opportunity to be taken. But obviously, with the animation and the graphic novel and the nature of our film, it sort of really lent itself to this. So
nice to see all these names too of incredible collaborators and craftspeople who, you know, it's nice on a film like this where you actually know most of the names, you know.
Yeah.
Which is not the norm, certainly.
No, it was very much a group effort. You know, you mentioned Bailey earlier, my assistant, who would run around with my iPad because I was wearing two hats as both an actor and a director, and sort of keeping me up to speed with what we were actually shooting. You had Vonda K. Morris doing great work with the makeup, and you know, just Nadine Haders and the costume, and Monica Levinson and Carla Gardini and Connor Flanagan, and you know, just fellow producers on this, and just it was so lovingly made, the film. And I think because the themes in it touch all of us, even though it's an adventure, this idea of family, love, loss, you know, if you live long enough, you cannot escape them. And I don't know, Emma Adele's script just really found a way into this that is both relatable, and I'm really hopeful we've made a film for the whole family across generations, young people, their parents and their grandparents. So I
Yeah.
think that's why we pulled together this great group.
So many great people involved.
Yeah.
And you know, coming around something that was right there on the page, you know, from the
Yeah.
very beginning. It was a profound experience for me personally to have so much synchronicity in the vision, which is not the norm.
No, and I feel there was the divine here as well. Do you remember that day, Matt? It was the one of the first shots in the film, actually, that drone shot of Lonnie on the scooter.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and we needed it to be sunny to match the shots we had shot on the ground the day before. And
Yeah.
you remember how cloudy it was that day and what happened.
And you got them moved.
I got the move. I'm a man of prayer. Matt was freaking out. I said, "You just wait. Just give me a
You just
second. Let me go.
get on the horn."
Let me go and talk to my Father in heaven." And we had how long did that gap in the cloud last?
Literally to the frame of what you needed to make that happen. So
Yeah. No, we were being looked after by God Almighty Himself on this.
the
one.
higher
And,
power.
Yeah, and that was just one of many moments where He showed up for us, and it was palpable. So
Yeah.
it was wonderful to take this journey with you, Matt. I hope it's one of many for us, and
I hope so too.
it was a complete delight.
Hope everybody else enjoys it as much as we did making it.
Amen.